Good morning, folks. Instructor Gaynor here again. We're going to continue our conversations about contractarian ethics, aka social contract ethics. We have been talking about some of the arguable advantages of social contract ethics. And just to recap, one of the things I added to the textbook's account was that it makes minimal assumptions about human nature. It doesn't assume that we are altruistic by nature. As a matter of fact, social contract ethics assumes that we are rationally self-interested human animals. And from those very base assumptions about human beings, it still is able to get to the argument that there is a reason that we ought to be moral. And this is because morality pays dividends, according to this. In other words, your incentive to be moral is that there is a practical payoff for you. In other words, it takes your basic rational self-interest as a starting point and argues that you have a reason to submit to the rules of morality because it pays off for you, at least in the long run, even if not in the short run. Next, I already talked about this, but I'll say it again. It explains why morality is a social phenomenon. In other words, morality is not in some abstract out there. Morality is agreement agreed to by free and rational agents. That is the origins of morality. And not to get too quasi-historical on you here, but indeed, we come into relationships of mutual benefit, not because we necessarily want to, according to this, but because we are better off with civil society, according to Thomas Hobbes. Because absent civil society, we are individuals in competition with one another for survival. And this is more John Locke than it is Thomas Hobbes here, but they come out of the same relative tradition. Take our concept of property that all of you take for granted. In the state of nature, I don't care if you believe that private property exists. In the state of nature, there is no way to protect your property. What am I talking about? Well, I'll give you a sort of rough and ready example of John Locke's account of property. Property is what we annex to ourselves through our labor. Now, suppose that I'm out in the state of nature and I find this wonderful tree that bears fruit that tastes very good to eat. I spend the entire day picking this fruit, and I'm tired at the end of the day. So I decide to take a nap next to the tree. Sure enough, highwaymen see these fruits, and they say, hey, we're going to take this fruit. And I say, no, you're not. It's mine. I picked it. How are you going to defend yourself? The answer is they're going to toll chalk you, beat you up, whatever they have to do to take that fruit. Because in the state of nature, this notion of private property does not exist. And even if it did exist, what teeth would be there to protect your property? This is why we enter in, this is part of why we enter into this social contract arrangement, according to John Locke. It is to protect a right to private property. Because absent civil society, finders keepers. It is society that enables these rights to be protected. And I want to say this loud and clear. I get mad as Hades when I hear students say, the government gives us our rights. No, the government doesn't give you your rights. According to the natural rights tradition, you have these rights as natural things simply because you exist. governments can either take these rights away from you, or they can make a promise to do the best they can to protect certain of these rights. So for anyone who says the US government gives you the right to free speech, no, it doesn't. It protects that right, and sometimes it decides when your free speech isn't worth protecting. Like you don't have a right to yell fire in a crowded building. And that's because A, it's not political speech. B, it's likely to cause a whole lot of danger to a lot of people. That's why certain speech acts are rendered illegal. Whereas political speech is what we are supposed to protect based upon our democratic model. Because the idea is that we are all better off when the minority has a right to speak just as much as the majority does, even though you might know that there is always tension in the social contract. Because there are people who come along who want to actually stifle some people's free speech. Why? Because they don't want society to change in ways that make them unhappy or uncomfortable or might hurt their pocketbooks. Now, I just gave this example not only to reiterate this position about the role of the social contract, but to give you an example of where people within the context of a social contract disagree with one another about what the terms of the contract ought to be. I have extended family members who think that they're being rational. Notice I said think that they're being rational, who would like to see any kind of speech criticizing the country to be punishable. They would like to see burning the flag to be punishable by prison sentences. Now, the funny thing is, they don't mind it when their own political faction is criticizing the government that they don't like. AKA, their principles aren't really universalizable here. They want free speech for their side, but they actually want to stifle the speech of anyone who disagrees with them. You know people like this, right? Yeah. Darn it, they're criticizing the country, man. We ought to throw them in jail. Yeah. These are the conversations at the holidays. That's why my wife says, shut up. Things will go better if you grin and bear it. Anyway, I did want to talk. Now, there's other terms of the contract that supposedly free and rational people disagree on too. Now, notice the contractarian might say, if you're not seeing things clearly and objectively, perhaps you're not being rational. This is why they might say free and rational people would agree to the same terms. It's just that we might disagree on who's being rational and who's not. That's a tough thing to pin down. Now, anyway, this is a part that I wanted to spend a little more time with because the author of the text took out the reading by John Rawls. That was in previous edition, and he talks a bit about John Rawls. Now, John Rawls' version of the social contract is one that he wrote about in the mid-1970s. So philosophically speaking, this is actually pretty recent stuff. He wrote a book called A Theory of Justice. I'm not necessarily recommending you read the book because it's rather long and life is rather short. But excerpts are not a bad idea to check out if you have time. Now, John Rawls is coming out of the same basic tradition that Thomas Hobbes is. But he will argue for a much more substantial version of a social contract as opposed to a minimalist one. And by the way, folks, I'm going to be taking great liberties here in condensing these ideas so I can explain them in as simple and understandable way as possible. Now, just like the contractarianism that we've been talking about, John Rawls of Harvard will argue that we are We are by nature rational and self-interested. Now, folks, he says that if you're trying to determine what kind of a social contract is a good one, and by good one, I mean one that a rationally self-interested person would say, sign me up. This is the kind of social contract I would like to live in. He says we have to first start out by assuming what he calls the original position. The original position is a little bit like Hobbes' state of nature, minus all the gore. The original position is to assume that no civil society has yet taken place. That we are free and rational, yeah, I forgot to mention free, that we are free and rational beings, considering what kind of social arrangement that we would like to be a part of. No arrangement has been made yet. Now, what he contends that from the original position, free and rational beings would like a society that at minimum does these two things. That to the extent that it is possible, we would want a social contract that would maximize liberties. In other words, what we call political freedom is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's something that free beings would want to have maximized. Now, guess what, folks? But we want more than liberty. Guess what we also want as self-interested beings? We also would like to be well off. And when we're talking about well off here, we might be talking about well off in a little bit like the way that John Stuart Mill was talking about it earlier in the semester. We want to have our basic necessities. We want to have our creature comforts. We don't want to be unnecessarily have our property seized, things of this nature. We would like to be able to earn a decent living. We don't want to be working 80 hours and not be able to pay our phone bills and things of this nature. So these are the kind of things that we would like out of a society. Now, what he contends is this. When you are judging a social contract as to whether or not it is a good one, and by the way, people who are judging social contracts, this is what the author is calling contractors. Contractors refer to free and rational individuals who are going to submit to the social contract. In other words, giving up some of our natural right to liberty for the benefits that civil society affords us. Now, do we want to give up too much of our freedom? Hades, no, right. We don't want to give up too much of our freedom, but we recognize that we may have to give up some of our freedom to be protected from hiring and things of that nature. Now, what the contractors need to do according to Rawls, and you're going to have to know this. He poses a sort of thought experiment when he says decisions about what is a decent society must be made behind a hypothetical veil of ignorance. Ignorance of what? Ignorance of exactly which member of that society you would happen to be. In other words, when you're thinking about what kind of a society is a good one that you would want to submit to, you can't I couldn't take for granted that I would be what? For those of you who read the text, you can belt it out. White and male. In other words, I can't take those kind of things for granted. You can understand why a person who knows that he will be born a white male would say, America, yeah, because I was born with advantages that I never had to earn. And if this sounds like check your privilege talk, good, because it is check your privilege talk. It is sort of no wonder why a self-interested person would want to live in some societies if they thought that they were going to get some systematic advantages that they wouldn't have to earn. Now, are these systematic advantages fair? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No rational being would submit to a social contract ahead of time if they knew that they would be a person born systematically disadvantaged simply because of the accidents of their birth. This is something that this veil of ignorance test leads to. Free and rational beings would submit to the social contract that would be the fairest one. Now, not just the fairest one, we would still like the one that would maximize our liberties relative to the amount that would have to be given up. And we would also like our prospects of being well off to be better. Now, this is why John Rawls argues that there might be societies that free, rationally self-interested ages might submit to, even if some freedoms were taken away. Guess what kind of situations? If people overall were considerably better off in a society with more controls, free and rational beings might be willing to give up some of that freedom for being materially better off. Less worries and things of that nature. But yeah, if you think of, let me give you another example to consider this veil of ignorance test. If you were born in a particular society in which you knew you would be systematically disadvantaged and discriminated against because of your sex or the color of your skin, you would probably say that that society does not measure up to the Rawlsian ideal of a good social contract. Most of us would likely say the American version of the social contract is far from perfect. However, most of us would say it is a better one than it was 150 years ago. Well, why? Because we have expanded the community of people who count as people, even if there are still systematic injustices. We have expanded the scope of the people that we call people. People who had little opportunities before now at least have some opportunity, even if I would argue that that opportunity is still far from equal. Because some of us, and by the way, I've complained many times about having been born on the wrong side of the tracks. I did not get to go to the colleges that I was able to get into because of, sadly enough, the same reason why many of you are here. Oh, that's my symbol for scratch. Money, bucks, quid, lack of money. Now, of course, there's plenty of people of less merit than you people who can get into any college they want because they were born with a silver spoon. This is why we don't live in a meritocracy, folks. Now, notice whether you self-identify as a conservative or a liberal, there is a good chance that you think that meritocracies are good things. Now, keep in mind, depending on your politics, you might disagree with one another over what would count as a meritocracy. Because the fact is, I probably could have gone to those colleges. I don't know if I would be better off than I am right now, but I would have had to go into debt, $150,000 or more. Heck, I could buy 2 crappy houses like mine for that price. So you see why I wasn't going to do it. But yeah, I would have liked to have been born with that silver spoon. I'd be king of the world probably by now. I'm joking, of course. I wouldn't want to be king of the world. Because unlike some people, I know that being king of the world is a responsibility. I wouldn't want my boots licked, like some people. Sorry, my politics are showing. But anyway, wow, I was going to erase something. So you have an idea of the Rawlsian contract? Thanks. The point I want to make about the Rawlsian version of the contract is it is a fairly substantial version of the social contract. Because I have seen people arguing from a Rawlsian version of the social contract that most of us, if we were thinking rationally about things, would probably opt for a version of the social contract where there was a great deal more economic security than we have. As compared to the rest of the Western world, we have some of the worst prospects when it comes to economic security. Were you aware of this, folks? If you don't read critical media, you might not be aware of this. But we have some of the worst economic security as individuals than the rest of the Western world. And of course, our lack of economic security is argued for by many people because it would take away their freedom to choose their own health care plan. You know, things of that nature. Or, oh, part of our insecurity is the fact that the environment is going to Hades. Well, some people do not want to give up their economic freedom in order to protect the environment that who depends on? Yeah, every last one of us. And of course, you can hear some people say, well, we shouldn't have to help you out because you're the jackasses that live in Florida. Or you're the stupid people who live near the coast in Texas. No, they don't use that kind of cruel language. They mask it behind, you know, nice sounding rhetoric. But yeah, a Rawlsian version of the contract would not be as cruel and unusual. Yeah, I'm willing to say those things, as our version of the social contract, in which you are pretty much perpetually in financial insecurity. Because, of course, no one is guaranteed a job. And they're always talking about how low unemployment is right now. Oh, I shouldn't be, I'm getting too riled up about this. Unemployment numbers mean almost nothing if you're a critically thinking, rational person. Because unemployment numbers do not account for underemployment. In other words, people with great degrees and great qualifications, but there's no jobs available in their field. They also don't account for the fact that we have slowly moved into what is called a part-time economy. In other words, well-qualified people working 3 part-time jobs with no benefits, with no retirement and things of this nature. This is perhaps why, and I'm giving some examples here, we argue over the social contract. There are some people who think that the social contract should be so thick. And I'll give you an example. How many of you have heard recent rhetoric about the notion of a guaranteed basic income? It's not talked about a lot in the mainstream press because we wouldn't want the middle class to actually think meaningfully about the system. Because people might actually stand up and ask for change, you know, something of this nature. So if you kind of keep it out of the press, people are liable not to talk about it. But there is talk about this in our Northern European counterparts, about a guaranteed basic income. Yeah. And by the way, folks, these countries already have what? Yeah. Nationalized health care. Now, of course, in our country, opponents of it will call it socialized medicine to make it sound like, if we do this, folks, pretty soon it'll be communism. Stalin will be the head of the country and we'll be sending you to all the work camps and you all die miserably. In other words, any attempt to move in the direction of what our European counterparts have in terms of a socioeconomic safety net, appeals to fear are used in the political press to try to scare people. I mean, this is political season, folks. Socialism, socialism, socialism. Well, guess what? There are some people who, when they think about it, they actually think that these things aren't such a bad idea once you actually understand them. Once you actually understand them. Now, of course, you might be able to give up some of what some people call freedom, or I like to call them perceived freedoms. Because the fact is, I do not have the freedom to choose my own health care. Does anyone know what I mean? It looks like freedom on paper, but it's not. Because I am stuck with the plans that my employers give me an option to have. I have several choices, but guess what? I don't have an actual choice. Because I have children, I basically have to pick the overpriced one that will tell me what doctors are in network and which doctors are not in network, which means I actually may not be able to choose my own doctor if they are not in. They go, well, you can go and you can pay an extra $60 out of pocket. Come on, how many of us do that? That's why the reason when they say, well, we want people to have choice. Well, my question is, do I really have choice anyway? If I had my choice, I wouldn't do it at all. Because after all, what does every one of us want more of? Money in our pocket. But that's not in my rational self-interest once I think about it. Because once I think about it, it is in my rational self-interest to at least get regular annual checkups. Why? And by the way, our country should think about this. These are the recommendations of the World Health Organization, whose only interest is seeing that more people in the world have access to basic health care. An ounce of prevention costs a lot less than actually treating a person with stage 2 colon cancer. But the problem is, if you don't have coverage for annual well visits, it actually discourages people from going for annual well visits. And if your insurance plan does not provide it, and you have to pay all of it out of your pocket, it will seem to be short-term rational to buy 2 cases of beer rather than go to the doctor. No, that's me. Maybe not you decent people. But yeah, it would seem more rational, but of course it's not. Because if I do end up with stage 2 colon cancer, there's a good chance I won't make it. And if I do make it, it will cost me and the system a lot more money. It will cost the system a lot more money. So in the end, and I want to make, I better shorten this a little bit here. In the end, take a guess what would cost less. Yeah, some kind of system by which all of our resources are pulled, so all of us will at least get the basics. Because guess what? Poor people get paid for in one way or another also. In other words, everybody ends up paying anyway. Our European counterparts and the World Health Organization have found out that Other ways of doing this part of the social contract are actually more efficient and more economical, doing it one way rather than the way our country has been doing it. Now, of course, the reason why I'm driving home this issue is because this is one facet of the social contract that people vehemently disagree about. How should health care be done? Because that is something that we decide on collectively. I'll give you a couple more. Gun control issues. Issues concerning guns are also social contractarian conversations. How much of our right to own a firearm ought to be restricted out of the name, in the name of public safety? To what extent ought my speech to be regulated? And granted, this is a moral issue, but it's also a social contract issue. What does my right to bodily self-determination entail? If you happen to believe that a woman has a right to do with her body as she sees fit, you are likely to take what position on a woman's right to an abortion? The answer is that the state should have nothing to say on that issue. Why? Because it's the woman's body. And besides, who will be the one paying the price in the long run? And by the way, rational beings have to also look at things in terms of dollars and cents. This is why some of us say, if the government is going to restrict that woman's right, the government had better throw her a buttload of money to see to it that that child will live a decent life. And I will admit on camera here, I am not as decent as you people are. I happen to see a good life in terms of creature comforts. I have not grown up in that way, which I'm willing to admit. I don't appreciate life simply because I'm alive. Because I have all these economic burdens placed on me. You got to pay for this, you got to do that, and it's always about everybody else. So for people who say that life is such a tremendous gift that we should value in and of itself, perhaps your life isn't bad enough. You get what I mean? Some of us think that there should be a right not to be born. But of course, we don't have that choice. We don't have that choice. Now, my wife doesn't like hearing me talk like this because implicitly says you don't love me or you don't love your life. No, I just get pissed off some days. And I get particularly angry when people want to tell me how I ought to think about things, applying their values to me, that I should see things their way. Because we live in what kind of a society, supposedly? Supposedly a free society, where people are supposedly allowed to think for themselves and have a right to bodily self-determination. Anyway, sorry for that fired up moment. But yeah, when I'm talking about expenses like health care and so forth going up, yeah, they're going up in our wonderful free privatized system. Anyway, yeah, it's that time of year again. You've seen the TV commercials, right? All those poor people on Medicare who have to make these crazy decisions. Read the fine print that I couldn't understand. And I have a high reading level. I'm not bragging, it's mostly luck. But I have a high reading level, and I can't understand the fine print. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? It's not really freedom to choose when you have no idea what you're choosing. Or if you only have 3 crappy options to choose from. Some of us don't think that's a choice. That's a sentence. Anyway. Okay. Now, we okay with the Dale Vigors? I went over a lot of examples already. Now, the author also talks about how the contractarian approach offers a method for justifying every moral rule. And I'll state it to you bluntly. If free and rational people would agree to it, then it is the rule. Then it is the rule. It would justify the immorality of things like slavery. Because nobody would consent to live in a society where there was a good chance that they would be a slave. It would be a society where people wouldn't want egregious inequalities. Because you would understand that you would be one of the person who might be separate but unequal. You know, that kind of thing. Now it explains why morality is objective. Why? Because morality is decided upon by free, rational beings deciding behind what Rawls calls a veil of ignorance. Now, folks, ideally speaking, would we agree to the same social contract, according to this, as free and rational beings? The answer is yes. Notice I said ideally. The thing is, what are we not really able to do? We are not fully able to do this, no matter how hard we try. And number two, are we being rational all the time? You saw how fired up I was a minute ago. Obviously, my emotions were getting a hold of me. Your emotions get in the way if you're doing good reasoning. So yeah, if we disagree with one another, one or more of the parties might not be looking at the issue with objective rationality. And granted, it's difficult to do, because just about everything that you hold near and dear might actually just be conditioned points of view that you take for granted, even if they are not rational points of view to hold. Now, it also justifies why and when it is acceptable to break moral rules. Now, please don't get this wrong, and it's discussed a little in this chapter and a little in the next chapter. In general, it is impermissible to break the social contract. Now, the Rawlsian, and by the way, I'll put it this way, because saying that it's okay to break a social contract when it suits you is akin to your saying that you would be better off without the social contract, which is the position taken by Thomas Hobbes' fool. Now, folks, a person who believes in a minimalist version of the social contract would say even a very bad social contract is technically better than what? Better than no social contract at all, because the alternative is the state of nature. So even a bad civil society is better than no civil society at all. And if I can give you a famous line said by many politicians, Saddam Hussein was a son of a bitch, but he was our son of a bitch. Various politicians said that. We've said that about many cruel dictators. Did you know that? Cruel dictators have oftentimes kept the peace in regions where the U.S. had strategic and economic interests. Now, the thing is, whenever even a bad social contract breaks down, what ensues? Civil war. Everybody suffers in a civil war. And this is kind of the argument for why even a bad social contract is better than no social contract at all. And we can agree to disagree on that. But that's the position that's largely been taken. Now, folks, John Rawls of Harvard, who actually thinks we should try to get to a better, more ideal social contract, he would contend that there are rare cases in which the social contract can be broken. And he would even say you may have a duty to do so. Please don't get this wrong when this question shows up. That's a hint. Civil disobedience, according to the Rawlsian version of the social contract, is sometimes justified. When the terms of the contract are so odious, so egregious, not only do you have a right, because if the social contract is odious like that, rational beings really wouldn't consent to it if they were looking at things clearly. This is why marches for civil rights and slowing down commerce in the name of civil rights would be considered justified by someone like John Rawls, because the terms of our social contract were just that unfair. Now, to be clear about this, those who participate in civil disobedience know that what is on the side of those in control of the social contract. Power is on the side of those who control the social contract. And those who have power are going to fight hard to maintain the status quo power structure, no matter how unfair it is. Why? Because they benefit from systematic injustices. Now, I want to make a distinction here that's not in the book. Some of you may have had this conversation elsewhere. They should have it in high school. But they won't, because it might get young people thinking too much. There is a difference between power and authority. The government almost always has power, but some of us think that it doesn't always have authority. Authority means the legitimate right to exercise that power. When a society is systematically discriminating against some people, that society has in effect lost its legitimacy. When a society is silencing critics systematically, throwing critics in jail and things of that nature, it has lost its democratic legitimacy. When a society is corruptly run by money just to make rich people more money, it has lost its legitimacy. We can agree to disagree on those definitions of lost its legitimacy. But it is clear that the government tends to have power, but some of us would say it doesn't always deserve to be regarded as having authority. Now, because it has power, people who are trying to set the system right, and by the way, people who are on the side of power will consider the civil disobedient people to be the bad people. They will probably find all kinds of negative labels about them. It used to be communists, agitators. Now, of course, we'll just say anti-American, right? If you disagree, we'll call you anti-American. So the majority of people will say, oh, those are just bad people, bad people. It's starting to sound like somebody. Bad people. Of course. And others are very fine people. But anyway, nobody is saying that civil disobedience doesn't come with a price. In other words, if you are going to work to try to make a social contract more just, you may have to have a price to pay in order to make that so. Many people who participated in civil disobedience have been jailed, some of them killed, some of them surveilled, demonized by the press, things of this nature. But some people would say the society's social contract is that odious, that unjust. Decent people who understand what a good social contract is may actually have a duty to put themselves on the line to improve that contract. Cheers, and we'll continue with this discussion next time.